I am delighted today to welcome Scott Morris to the show. Scott is founder and CEO of Propulsion AI. He has been a successful people operations executive for over 20 years, and he's now traded or recently traded, maybe, I don't know, his cushy corporate gig, as he describes it, for a tech bro vest and the challenges of being an entrepreneur. His track record spans 5 industries across North and Central America, where he's consistently delivered bottom line results through people focused initiatives. And his latest venture, Propulsion AI, uses a unique blend of human and artificial intelligence to help organizations achieve clarity about roles and accelerate hiring, simplifying screening, onboarding, all that good stuff in talent management that we all love. It transforms what has been typically 4 or 5 hours of effort into little as 15 minutes, as one example, and is used by employees from Albertsons, Wisk Aerospace, municipalities like the City of Denver, healthcare and manufacturing companies, and a host of others. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
Nigel, I'm so excited to be here with you.
It's going to be a great chat. Tell us a little bit, give us a little bit of, there's your blurb, your marketing. Tell us a little bit of a real background about who you are, where you are, and family, and that sort of thing.
Gosh, let me tell you, I'll tell you the stuff that you can see in my LinkedIn profile. I'll give you a quick summary, and then I'll tell you the stuff that you can't read. So
Yeah.
as you alluded to in your intro, I have about 25 years total in the profession of human resources, people operations, about 20 of those in a C-level role. And I've worked in organizations as large as 15,000 and down to 250. And I think I'm really lucky to have had that kind of breadth in terms
Yeah.
of size of company. In a large company, as you well know, you learn how to steer strategy, and you learn how, the politics of influence and how to move large initiatives forward, and things that project managers, regardless of the level, have to do all of the time. In a small company, even with a C-level title, nobody cares what your title is in a small org, right? And you just roll up your sleeves and you do the work. The reason I think I'm so thankful is that the smaller company experience has kept me connected to frontline problems that practitioners face every day, whether that's HR business partners or recruiters or, employee relations, professionals or comp professionals. And so I feel like I've gotten the entire spectrum, and I feel really, really thankful for that. I've learned, I think, by virtue of, you mentioned in the intro that I have both North America experience. I don't have any Europe and Asia experience, but I do have experience working in Central America. And one of the things that it's taught me is that the problems that we deal with are human problems. They're not really, although there are nuances that accrue to different, geographic areas. Most of the problems are issues of humans, and as such, they are universal. And so I feel thankful that I've gotten to see that in a couple of different national contexts and international contexts as well.
Brilliant.
Can I tell you the stuff you can't read?
Yeah, let's get to the interesting stuff.
I started my career as an actor. I was a working actor, luckily. I have a handful of movie credits. I have a handful of commercial credits. I lived in Los Angeles. And one thing, if you ever visit Los Angeles, that you get to find out is everyone is what's called a slash. You are an actor slash something else. You're an actor slash waiter. You're an actor slash mechanic, but everybody's a slash. And I was lucky that my slash actually had a working front end to it, which was in the entertainment industry. I went on and went to college, and after college left and became a police officer with the city of Los Angeles. And one thing that I took away from that experience was this recognition that 4 people could stand on 4 corners of the exact same intersection and watch the exact same accident happen and have 4 very different perspectives about what they had seen and what they had experienced. And I take that as an important lesson because in organizations, that's exactly what guides everything. It is personal perception colored by past experience, sometimes colored by trust. And I know your audience of project managers experiences that firsthand as they lead frequently without organizational authority, have to lead through influence. And I know, at least I hope, that every single person is saying that's right. I have to understand those people's experience in order to motivate the performance that I want.
Yeah, absolutely. It's immediately popped into my head there was when I if I send a status report to 4 different people, the way that it's read can be completely different, and typically is. And you get 4 different phone calls almost immediately. So
Right.
it kind of, and the same. You step out of a meeting, and you've got a list of actions you think everyone's got, and they've got a completely different list of actions, or actually they've not got any actions at all. So yeah, I can see how that learning those lessons is powerful if you remember them. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about Propulsion AI, because obviously that is the one thing we chatted about before, and kind of your latest venture, and kind of how we're going to talk about what you're trying to achieve with that, and how some of those lessons can be helped with the PM community.
So I think the company was born. So we launched in 2023, and the sort of the driving forces behind my launch of the company really were twofold. One is over the course of my career, I've bought a lot of software. And one of the things that always struck me was that, at least insofar as HR technology is concerned, it always felt like it was made by maybe smart software people, but certainly not people who had walked a day in the shoes of a practitioner. And as such, the problems that were being solved didn't, to me, feel like root cause solve problems. Even if the software worked, it wasn't really getting to the root of how do you transform the system, and how do you really solve the underlying problems. And for 20 years I'd been saying to myself, you know what, even though I'm a non-technical guy, I think I can build better software by starting with a different premise. The second part, and I think it's arguably more important, we as a company, Propulsion AI, we're very focused on this concept of fit. And I do not mean, and I always feel like I have to qualify, I don't mean fit in. I've never fit in. I don't want other people to fit in. But there are hallmarks in organizations where you absolutely fit. And some of them, at least for me, are, do you have to pick your words, or does the way that you communicate just land naturally with your peers and your boss? And do you receive criticism in the spirit that it's intended? Do you have an environment of trust? Those are all hallmarks of fit. And I think that there are real ways that we can go about increasing that. And that's something that we're very focused on. Now, in part, that's so important to me because in my last corporate assignment, after 25 years of dispensing advice to others, I found myself in a situation where I just didn't fit. Nothing was right. The areas where I was tolerant of maybe less than a top standard, and the places where I was absolutely unbudging about the same, and the ways that I communicated, and the priorities I had, and everything, and I mean everything, was off. And ultimately, I left that organization. I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, this is just not working out." And he said, "Well, that's good because it's not working out for me either." And we parted, and we parted amicably, but the toll on me was really heavy. There's a financial price tag to turnover, but there is a personal, impact that is very hard to financially quantify, but it's absolutely present. And so we as a company are really focused on changing that equation. And the way that we're starting that is by helping managers design roles differently. And the reason that's so important is that what we're aiming at, what most managers want, they want initiative from the people that they put into the roles. They want accountability from the people in those roles. And they want those individuals to be highly productive, and they want them to stay. And yet, when most managers sit down to, like, let's say you're going to go hire a role, and HR is going to say to you, well, what does the role do? And the first thing that most of us will do is we start to rattle off a set of tasks. And that works exactly to the opposite of creating autonomy, mastery, and purpose. 3 factors that Daniel Pink writes about in a book called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And it works against this notion of getting initiative and accountability. So we designed a platform that helps managers design roles, and then it writes all of the collateral for you.
That's a brilliant summary of what there, and I think it's fine. One of the questions that I kind of sit in here, and maybe listeners will listen to this as well, is that it's the question you asked me before: why would project managers be interested in this topic? And my as we talked about it, is that I don't know, but I suspect the project management environment, and certainly I know with my experience, is that I'm constantly getting new people, whether that's me moving to a new department or me bringing in new people into a project or starting a project fresh. It's about building new relationships, bringing new team members on, finding new team members. So that change and that churn that you said, that refresh of people, is something that I think we end up doing a lot of. And there will be people who leave. And even if you're in a project for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever, you will get people you have on. And whether they are, sometimes you get handed people, sometimes you have to go get the people, sometimes people get foisted upon you, sometimes it's an area you just throw into a bucket. But there are quite a lot of occasions where we need to find a person. And people say to me, right, you need to fill out this system with this form, with this job description, which is a standard job description maybe that comes in there. And I kind of go, yeah, okay, yeah, it's kind of that's kind of, no, it says project manager, be able to project plan. I kind of go, but I struggle with the sort of, when people say, what do you want them to be? What level do you want them to be? What capabilities do you want them? And it's kind of, well, in our context, I understand what I want. And I go, it's the kind of response, you know what I mean? You know what they can do. So that's where, obviously, that's the context of where I'm coming from. And that I've seen it where, was it the phrase soup to nuts or whatever, that the PM will do. So they're on their own kind of thing on a project. So a small organization, they might be the only person who does that recruiting, get a bit of HR, a little rubber stamp approval, but they may have to do it all. And anything that can, because it's a painful process, but even more so when it goes wrong, from a project, never mind money, project delivery, selfishness, getting the project delivered. If you've got the wrong person, it's 3 months before you've worked out the wrong person. And if you've got a 6-month project, you're in the hole. So where do you start with improving that? Where do you start?
Great question. The number one thing is mindset, just like it is for so many other things. The way that we think about the role is going to determine a lot of what we come out the other side with. Let me use a sort of tangential thought experiment with you. Let's say I came to you and I said, Nigel, I want you to invest $50,000 in my company right now. I want you to write a check. The first question that you would probably ask me is about where I would create value with that money. The next question that you are likely to ask me is going to be about what the return on that investment that you would be making, what that return would be. And the third question, I'm guessing, would likely be about time. Do you think I have those three questions right? So how are you going to create value? What are you going to return to me, and over what time period? What I think is interesting about that as a thought experiment is that those answers are pretty standard no matter who you ask. If we're talking about a dollar investment, but that thinking tends to break down when we start thinking about hiring. But salary is an investment. And as the investor, whether it's your money or not, if you're the investor, you have the right to expect a return. And I think that mindset, if you shift from I'm hiring somebody to do a bunch of duties to I am investor or an investor and I'm going to invest in somebody because I want them to generate outcomes for me, that mindset shift matters hugely to what we ultimately succeed with. So I think in a direct answer to your question, that's the starting point. Then we have to start working the equation backwards. And most of us, like I said a second ago, most of us are really easily able to touch the tasks. I need you to do this activity. I need you to, do that, sort of thing that has been on my desk and I don't want it on my desk anymore, right? We're humans, most of us pretty similar, and that tends to be really easy for us. But I think you've got to reverse the order and you've got to work the equation backwards. So we start with, and we can scale this thinking to the enterprise level, or we can scale it down to the project level. And sometimes they're synonymous, right? And I recognize that, but it doesn't really matter the scale. There is a result that needs to get produced. And the first thing that we should be in touch with is, what is that result? And then working backwards from that, we need to ask ourselves the question, what are the outcomes that should get produced in order to generate that result? What are the big levers? Then we work one step backwards from that and we say, okay, how would we, if we were moving that lever, if that outcome was being achieved, how would we measure that success? And then we move one step farther back and we say, okay, what are the skills, capabilities, competencies that we need in order to move those levers? Now, what you wind up with, if now I spin this around and put it in the context of a job, what you wind up with is, okay, here's how this job fits my strategy. Here are the outcomes that I need it to produce. Here's how the success measures, call it KPIs, later turned into OKRs or key results. What are the competencies and skills, et cetera? That is a complete job description. And then out of that, now we have an objective standard that we can measure the people that we're going to consider to put into this role. And it's a really thorough, design for that comparison. The biggest employment problem when it comes to interviews is that we compare candidate to candidate. We shouldn't. We should compare each candidate to an objective standard and say who measures up the best, because that's where we find the most success. Candidate to candidate is highly biased. But the reason most of us don't do that is we don't take time to develop that objective standard up front.
That's fast. There's a lot to unpick there. That's really interesting. The OKRs thing is really interesting because that obviously forms when someone joins an organization, that would then form the objectives that you're setting, and whether that's for 12 months, an ongoing improvement of whatever, that sort of thing makes that conversation easy. And actually, I've talked to people not long ago, actually, was where they've gone, yeah, I got asked to do this. I went into an organization to do it. And then when I got in there, it was something entirely different to what I'd gone to interview for, what I'd been given, and to kind of sit there and go, okay, I'm not sure this is what I want to be doing. And it's probably not a symptom of anyone trying to deceive someone. It's actually the way that someone's explained what they want and what they really want. It can change. I suppose that organizations change, things change, but invariably it'll be that they haven't gone through that process of thinking what the real thing is, because as you say,
Well,
they've taken
what
this.
I think the other expression of that is where you get a message back as a candidate, you get a message back from the recruiter that says, hey, we're going to put this on pause. The CEO has some different ideas about what we should hire, or fill in the blank with the title, right? And what that usually is an indicator of is the exact same thing. They didn't think it through, and then somebody
Yeah.
called out and said, wait a minute, you're hiring for what? And it's because they didn't have that objective standard.
Yeah, I get that, and I suppose that's the thing with us with the projects is, as PMs, if we're looking at, I need a Java programmer, I need a bridge builder, whatever you're looking to, and this will happen with contracting out to third parties as well. Is that unless you and it's critical to do that when you're doing contracting and things, to say, I need someone to deliver this.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite difficult to think about. It's easier to think about the skill that you're after. It's not the objective you want them to use those skills to. And that's why I hear it is these are the skills I want you to use to give me this.
That's right.
And that's that competencies, isn't it? And it makes you think differently about your project outcomes, because you might sit there as a project going, I'm not sure what the outcomes are on this, because quite often we can be there and go, someone's given it me, I've got a plan, I'm running it.
Yeah.
If you think about the outcomes, you might say, hang on a minute, why are we doing that? And it's that business value that you're giving.
Let me try and turn this into a concrete example, and I wish I could do this with something maybe more close. I mean, I don't know whether this is not related to the work that project managers are doing, but let's say that you and I were going to hire an accountant. Now, traditionally, in that job description for an accountant, we might see a bullet item under responsibilities that says follow up on delinquent accounts. And right there, I start asking the question, why do you care about that? Right? Is it because as a boss, I need to see the effort, that I need somebody to come in every day and make a bunch of calls to a bunch of people who don't want to get those calls, or write a bunch of emails to a bunch of people that aren't going to read those emails, right? Is what I need out of this job to see that effort and to see somebody sweating it out every day? And my answer to that is no, because following up on delinquent accounts is one means to an end. And that end is a number called days outstanding. And days outstanding, and you know it and the audience knows it, but just for the sake of ensuring clarity, days outstanding is a measure of efficiency about how fast an organization can collect money that it is owed after delivery of products or services, right? And that number, that days outstanding number, has a big swing on things like available cash. And so we want that number to be low. But why then do we write a job description that says your job is to follow up on delinquent accounts rather than writing a job description that says your job is to move days outstanding from here to here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we move it,
Makes it.
then we move it backwards. And the ultimate thing that I want as a boss, and we talk about it, I mentioned it earlier, initiative and accountability, right? I want that employee to come to me and say, Scott, if days outstanding, if that's what's really important and you need me to move that number down, shouldn't I be doing these things? And as a boss, I want to be in the situation to slap my head and go, well, like, duh. Like, of course, like I didn't even think about that because I'm not on the front line with you. But yes, do those things as long as you have a reasonable belief that it's going to help you bring that days outstanding number down. And I think you can take that example and I think you can leverage it across a bunch of different organizational functions because it's always the same thing, starting with that result, working backwards into the outcomes and then into the measures.
It makes me and we made when we talked about this a few weeks ago when we first chatted, and I don't know if I mentioned it. There's I forget the name of the guy, Southwest Airlines CEO. I'm sure you've read the book, and around the sort of empowerment that they had around the organization
Yes.
to staff could just go, well, actually, I'm doing this. And it was to serve the customer, to give more value to the customer. And that kind of expectation setting, there's OKRs on that, is all right. Okay, so I can change what I'm doing. I can think about it. How do you write that down? Do you know what I mean? If you're there and you go, right, that person, we're going to upgrade their seat because they're not looking at the X, Y, and Z, whatever decision, this customer needs an extra seat. They've got a kid that's screaming and yelling. You can tell it. Let's put them in. Let's do this. Whatever. That wouldn't be written in a job description, that task, ever. But that behavior and that customer centricity, which is a fluffy word that anyone can say, well, what does that mean? Writing KPIs into that again, that kind of makes it. How do you write those? And if you think about it, it's hard. It's hard now even to think about how you'd write that into something to create that behavior and empowerment.
I think if we're thinking about the same guy, it's Herb
Yeah.
Kelleher
Yes,
from
that's it. Yes.
yeah, from
Yes.
Southwest Airlines. And what you're referring to, they likely described in terms of variables of customer experience. So what they
Yeah.
said is your job is creating the experience that makes people want to come back, that makes people want to fly on our airline. And then they worked that back into what would be the things, right? Quick problem resolution, or the attitude of service, the way that the individual was met. Those are the kind of outcomes that they wanted to generate, right? But here, see, I think the problem is less about the words that we use and more about where those words are focused. Because what we want to do is we want to say, your job is to handle customer complaints. No, it's not. Handling customer complaints is a means to an end to create an
Yeah.
experience. Creating the experience is your job. Handling the complaint and resolving the complaint, and here comes the KPI, within a certain amount of time, or correct that's really the key result. Customer complaints is the KPI, and then handled within X amount of time is the key result, right? But that's one of probably many different things that would have contributed to that outcome, that result that they wanted, that related to customer experience. And so if we start to document within role descriptions, if we're documenting tasks, there is I think it is an almost certainty we are never going to be able to describe the world in complete terms. So why try? Focus instead on the outcome and allow the individual to experiment with the tactics and provide them some room that they can move around in.
Because the thing is with those sort of things, you give guardrails, don't you? You give basically you can do this, and within these much parameters. If you're going to go outside that parameter, come back to me, then we talk about what you can or can't do, and and we all like those parameters being set to us, because the problem is you have two behaviors there. You either go, if someone doesn't set the guardrails, you go wild, or worse, I think, is if you don't set the guardrails, you stay constrained, and
Constrained.
the opportunities that are there don't get caught.
And when I think about the work that project managers done, and I've never been in a formal, I mean, I've managed a lot of projects, but I've never been in a formal project manager role. But I'm well familiar with the major sort of drivers of success for a project manager, right? Did you get there on time? Did you get there on budget? Right? Did you achieve the aims of the project? And when you think about that, like the project manager, if your job is to stay on budget, that is the result, right?
Yeah,
Budget is met, like we need this project to be brought in at this budget level. The project manager doesn't get an excuse of, oh, well, they did this crazy thing over here, because the expectation is the project manager is going to see it coming, work in advance of it, and facilitate the correct level perhaps of spending, or the correct type of spending that keeps that inside of budget. Their job is to put controls in. Their job is right to do all of these things. So I don't think that thinking is going to be foreign from a project management standpoint. We just need to extrapolate that to other types of work.
yeah, yeah. That's brilliant. So if we were say we've got our project managers out there, if you so obviously we said that's the first thing to do, get there, understand that, break down that, challenge that list of tasks, and go, is that actually going to give me what I want? Is it going to help me with my time, cost, quality? Actually, um, sometimes it is just someone you need to do a physical thing, or a specific thing, and it might be that task done, but you need it done with a certain timeline, because if you don't put the timeline on, as you said, that's fine, right? Create a piece of code that does this, delight the customer, do it quicker, whatever. There'll be all those parameters around there. How do you advise people to to be able to interview and build the next stages for those? Because I'll be honest with this, it's quite interviewing is a pain.
Mm.
Even reading CVs is a pain. Trying to, you know, what I mean, you'll get someone who'll come in. I know you look at a job description and you'll go, "Oh, I'll punt it in." You look at someone's CV, and um, it's funny how there's never any bad things in CVs. It's never anything in there. But it's not a surprise, is it? How do you align those? Because again, a lot of CVs that I've seen talk about tasks, maybe some responsibilities, and here's my weekly mention of manager tools, where they talk about CVs about saying short responsibilities and then achievements as the next three bullets. What did you achieve in that specific measurable achievements? Which again kind of goes to those OKRs, doesn't it? It's kind of reduced exactly what you said about before about unpaid debt. I've reduced the unpaid debt days. Bang, tick. I reduced it by 400, saving this much cash flow, which was this much interest for the organisation. That's clear, and you can see that in a CV. But actually, you don't tend to get that business value focus all the time out of CVs that I see, and maybe it's just what I see. What do you? How do you match those things up as a recruiter?
So let me I'm going to steer toward the piece that I think might be more practical for the
Yeah, that's
audience.
fine.
CV review, as a roadmap for our company, role design and the writing of the collateral materials is an entry point for us. We will
Yeah,
quickly, as we gain steam and grow, we will be quickly moving toward different items on our roadmap that deal with the screening process, that deal with the interview process, that deal with the onboarding process, and that deal with performance management of individuals that are in the role. Until we have the chance to do that, we're still, constrained to sort of the bounds of human effort. But let me steer toward interviews, because I think I can give a more practical response to you. If you the first starting point is you have to have the objective standard. If groups that have these long protracted interview processes, my experience has always been that is a group that doesn't understand the role very well, or they're not very organized to deliver, which means they don't have HR people that have project management skill sets, right? It's likely a combination of both. If you have that well-developed standard, and by the way, this is why setting up for all these things is in part why the role design, the writing of the collateral, et cetera, takes humans 4 to 6 hours. Our tool does it in as little as 15 minutes, right? So using our tool, the mindset's right whether you use our tool or not. If you use our tool, you're going to be significantly faster and you're going to be significantly more detailed. So let's assume you have that objective standard, that role design, and it's a well-designed role. In a direct answer to your question, the next stage is you must split up the interview process. Here's how we recommend that it gets split up, is that you work from that objective standard and you work in groups. So you say group one, here are the people that are going to be in group one as interviewers. Group one, your focus is only on how the individual's resume, past experiences, the items that are on their CV relate to the future outcomes that we need to generate in this business or on this project. And your job is to understand the relevance of one to the other and how the past experiences may influence or enable the individual to generate those outcomes. That is all you get to focus on. Group two, you're going to focus on technical knowledge and skills. And what I want to know as the hiring manager or the project manager, what I want to know is what skills of this list, because presumably if we've done the role design correctly, we have both competencies and skills that are built in and levels of needed proficiency in each of the skills. So group two, you're focused on technical knowledge and skills. I want to know which they have today coming in and which ones we can build for the future. Group three, you're focused on behaviors and competencies. Group four, if there is one, maybe you're focused on leadership and culture. But by dividing and conquering, you get a more 360-degree view of that candidate. But again, not candidate to candidate, candidate to objective standard. So the process becomes more targeted, less biased, and faster because you don't have overlaps of questions. You can presumably do the entire interview process for a candidate or candidates in a day or in a half a day, right? If you've got one right after the other and you've got all these four groups, and the candidate experience changes. So now we're not dealing with, and there's no shortage of feedback from candidates who have had bad experiences, and that feedback damages employer brands. They didn't know what they were doing. I got asked the same questions. I got asked irrelevant questions. It wasn't targeted. All of these are signs and symptoms of not working off that objective standard and of subsequently then not managing that interview like a project. I'm going to break it apart. We're working in segments. Each segment is going to relate to each other, and then we're going to come back and we're going to debrief and do a review when we're done.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful because I never thought of it that way because I quite often I focus on competencies because I kind of focus not sort of behavioral competencies because of that to get that fit because probably the rest of it I haven't got those OKRs the behavioral elements of it. I know that even if they haven't got the capabilities, if the behavior's right, you have to make an assumption on some of those. So
Yeah.
it shortcuts it a little bit, but I can see how by having that role description and having that measurement, it's really good. And you do kind of pit them against each other, don't you? There is that, which it
Well,
doesn't help because you're just
there's the
getting the best.
tendency to do it again because we're
Yeah,
humans, and that is a bias that we have. And overcoming
yeah,
bias is a way to really get down to understanding who is going to succeed and who isn't. I will tell you, best practice is always to have interviewers. And worst practice is when they're done interviewing to ask them a question that is just inane, like, what did you think? Horrible question because it means that we didn't set up the targeted search for something that was connected to that was correlated to success before we started. What do you think is? Why don't you talk for a while and I'll make my own decision? That's not helpful, and it doesn't get down to who has a higher probability of succeeding and who doesn't, because the higher probability of success, even if they're different from us, especially when they're different than us, that's who we want to select.
that's brilliant. Now I know that you've got another call to jump to pretty soon, and that there's about 4 episodes I think we've got on this things that I think we could have gone down in. And so, was there anything that you wanted to just mention, talk about that I haven't given you a chance to? So
Gosh, I
before
mean,
we call up,
like I'll
I
say
know there's
one
100
thing
things.
about the platform because I know what we're talking here is concepts that are
Yeah,
whether you again whether you use our tool or not. I want your audience to apply this mindset,
yeah,
to utilize these techniques, and to create success in their projects and in their organizations. But if you choose to use our tools, the way that Athena works, she is going to start out by asking you questions about the roles. She is built on frameworks that are used by top HR business partners and top recruiters, top heads of talent, chief people officers. And then we enable those frameworks with artificial intelligence. So she starts out by interviewing you about this role. She's going to pull out of you enough information that she can form a hypothesis about the kind of outcomes that you might be interested in. She's then going to present those to you, and an iterative process starts. And every piece of content she delivers, you're going to iterate with her in the best, human. And this is why we say it's a blend of human and artificial intelligence, because it doesn't operate with as the way it's supposed to without both sides of that equation. She'll give you content, you'll give her feedback. You don't even have to give her full ideas. You can just tell her, like, I like this, I hate that, do the other. And then she's going to rewrite that and present it to you again. And as she goes piece by piece by piece, very methodically, she is going to then simultaneously write a performance-based job description for you, an SEO optimized job ad that can be posted to the web, social media content to advertise it, interviewer guides that break down into these buckets that I was talking about. She'll do, at least in the United States right now, she will do compensation analysis to help you understand whether your base salary is equitable given the responsibilities and the geography. We'll broaden that later to an international audience on the comp front as we grow. But all of these things in as little as 15 minutes, and for most users, right around the 30-minute mark.
The concepts, I think, when hearing them explained the way you've done, they're a bit no-brainers. And like you say, people can. So if people wanted to carry on the conversation, find out more about Propulsion AI, find out more about you, find out more about your acting, and find out what films you're in, and go and see those. I think you're your first actor I've had on. I've had someone who's done video work on films like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, but I think you're the first, and musicians, but I think you're the first actor. No.
Oh, I like being number one. So Nigel, I'm happy to help people. I'm not a consultant. We don't offer consulting services, but I'm very much a believer in paying it forward. And so if members of the audience want to get in contact with me, if they have questions, if they need help, I am more than happy to offer a point of view and try and offer guidance and advice. You can get me on LinkedIn is the easiest way. LinkedIn.com/in/M Scott M. And then if you want to find Propulsion AI on the web, the company name is Propulsion AI. The web URL is getpropulsion.ai.
Brilliant. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And lots of food for thought there. So thanks very much, my friend.
I so appreciate the invite, Nigel, and invite me back anytime. You're super easy to talk to. I love your concepts and your way of thinking. And it was my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks, man. So I have a number of sponsors, affiliate links in the way that it's set up that have kindly allowed me to share their services, really. The first one is Mike Clayton, and Mike runs online PM courses, and it is a great resource for getting those fundamentals of project management trained, reasonably priced, and Mike presents it in an accessible and clear manner. You can check out some of his videos on his YouTube channel and kind of give you a view of where they are. But the code for that, if you go to nigelcreaser.com/online PM courses, all one word, lowercase, that'll redirect you to it. There's very different levels that you can buy. You can buy individual courses, you can buy pathways as well, if you like. And I get a kickback off those. Mike kindly shares me that. So if you do jump on and use it, I hope you find it really useful. I think he has money back guarantees and things like that as well, so there's very limited risk on that. So jump on that, and that again, it's nigelcreasy.com/online PM courses, and enjoy.
Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creasy, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.